Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. I want to introduce you tonight to a spy, a former spy at least, and he's got a really fascinating story. He's spoken at a TEDx that I had recommended to me that was just a really interesting presentation. He's in the process of publishing a book. He's the founder of the Kirsch Group, a boutique risk consulting firm that assists organizations and individuals evaluating threats and risks. And he's going to tell us a little bit about, intelligence and risk and some of the challenges in our world today. Welcome to the show, Andrew Kirsch.
Thanks so much for having me. It's great to be here.
My pleasure. So tell me, what was this TEDx talk about? I had lots of people raving about it.
Oh, that's appreciate that. So I wrote a book. The book is out. It's called I Was Never Here. It's about my career with the Canadian Security Intelligence Service. So I was an intelligence officer, called a spy for Canada, and you don't often hear of Canada as having spies. And I joke that the Americans have Homeland and Jason Bourne and Zero Dark 30, and
you were Kirsch. Andrew Kirsch.
That's right. That's right. That's right. It's the closest we have in Canada is that RCMP Mountie from the '90s TV show Due South. We don't have a great history of Canadian intelligence officers and spies. So I wrote a book about it, and my TEDx talk is about that. It's kind of some of the distinctions, breaking some myths, and showing some differences between us and other intelligence services. But just because we don't have that history doesn't mean there aren't threats. There aren't important things that our intelligence service does, and that's what I wanted to talk about. I wrote a book about it, and now I help companies protect themselves from those types of threats.
So tell us a little bit about the experiences that you shared in your TEDx chat.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of myths about. Well, I guess the first myth is that we don't have one. Canada has a security intelligence service. We have a domestic intelligence service, which is different. When I tell people when I was a Canadian spy, they say, "Oh, it's like the CIA." I say, "Well, not exactly. The CIA is a foreign service. They operate abroad in Canada. We're a domestic service." And they say, "Oh, you must be like the FBI." I said, "Well, not exactly. The FBI is law enforcement. They're more like the RCMP. So we have a domestic security service. We joke about Kirsch, Andrew Kirsch. The British have a foreign service, MI6, a domestic service, MI5. We have just a domestic human intelligence service." And I kind of explain what that's like, to be a spy working under a different name, 20 minutes from where you live and where you grew up, knocking on doors and saying, "Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'd like to talk to you about threats to national security, and I need your help." And every single person I ever knocked on door of said, "What? Who are you? Spies? We have those here?" And that trying to raise some awareness, explain what we do, was what I was talking about, and some distinctions too. We don't carry guns, we don't have weapons. I used to joke that if I got into trouble, I could throw my BlackBerry at the person. I had those old hip holstered BlackBerries. That it's fun to work under a different name and have kind of two. Have a cover and an alias and those types of things. But it also can be stressful and challenging when you're out meeting with people and then at night lying to everyone about where you work and what you do. And that, as much as it's fun, it also creates unique challenges in your personal life when you live this double life. And sometimes you're kind of more open and honest with the people you're investigating than the folks that you've kind of known your whole life, which, as I said, is a very unique feature of being a Canadian spy.
Well, when you think of a spy, I didn't think you could write a book about it. You'd have to keep everything confidential. So.
Well, that it's true, and we haven't had a lot. The CIA, they have a book every other week, but there are things I obviously couldn't say in the book. We can't reveal sources and methods and the way that we collect intelligence, but you can certainly talk about the fact that we do. And Canada has our intelligence services. We say it's not a secret organization; it's an organization with secrets. So the fact that we have an intel service, the fact that people are out knocking on doors and asking for help in Canada, identifying themselves as CSIS intelligence officers, that happens every day. But what their information they're collecting, and some of the more sensitive technical ways that we collect information, that can't be revealed. And I worked in what we call our special operations unit, which is where you plant listening devices and covert cameras and track vehicles. And so I talk about kind of the experience of breaking into someone's car or searching somebody's car in the driveway while they're sleeping at night at 3 a.m, but not the kind of, what devices we used and how we would necessarily, go and do that. But definitely the odd feeling of,
so you're planting recording devices and breaking into cars. Do you have to have search warrants for that?
Yes, of course, all done legally. If somebody reaches a threshold of investigation, you can apply to the courts to get warrants that allow you access to information. So the warrants allow you access to information. You have to justify why you need it, why you think that person's a threat. But you can't, if the court says, you're allowed to access that person's emails, you can't just walk up to them and say, hey, the judge says I'm allowed to read your emails, because then they would know they were the subject of investigation. So they have the covert, special operations unit, and they send us out in the middle of the night and they say, we're allowed to go get it. We're allowed to have it. Can you go get it? And that's what we were doing. So all legal, all authorized. But this stuff is happening. That's one of the things that that intelligence services do. And I said, we kind of know that happens, or we think that happens, see the movie that it happens, but in reality, it's just regular folks out there that actually have to do it.
Wild. We're going to have to take a break for some messages, and we're going to be back in 2 minutes with Andrew Kirsch. I'm going to ask him how he got into this line of business. How can we get into this line of business? What were some of the things that he's uncovered? Maybe we'll ask him to read something from the book. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be back in 2 minutes. We're talking about Canada's spies. Kirsch, Andrew Kirsch. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Andrew Kirsch. He is a spy for Canada, and he's written a really fascinating book, and he's done a TEDx talk on it. And we're chatting about how we got into this line of business. Andrew, how did you get in to being a spy? What's what was the source of that? Is it a job you applied for in fourth year?
It's I said I wish I had a cool story. So I'm going to date myself here. I would say I was a university student during 9/11 and ended up in London, England, working in finance. And I was there in 2005 when the bombs went off in the UK on July 7th. And I'm really part of a generation of people around my age who, when this was all happening, kind of ran away and joined the circus, as we kind of say. So I wish there was a cool story. I was recruited in graduate school, and the reality is that, for me, it started with a Google search. And the bombs went off, and I said, how do I become a Canadian spy? And it takes you to a government website and an online portal, and I applied online, submitted an online application, not knowing really what I was getting into, what it involved. They tell you what the stages are. And I just, thought that this is something that I, want to do. Things were happening in the world and I wanted to get involved. And you took me about 15 months, and there's role playing, and there's a polygraph exam, and you are going through a number of stages to determine if you're suitable for this type of a career, or psychological assessments. And all of a sudden they give you a call after about 15 months and say, can you start in a week? And you think, sure. And I moved to Ottawa and didn't, told people I got a job and can't talk much about it, and I got to move. And, that's what happens. And at that time, there was a lot of money went to public safety. They were ramping up, obviously, in the wake of kind of what was going on in the world. And there were a lot of us, and they run these training classes. And we had a 6-month training class where you learn some of the fun stuff, how to recruit, how to meet people, how to do kind of spy stuff, and also the very bureaucratic, how to fill out paperwork, how to document your meetings, how to write reports and memos, and all these things that maybe you wouldn't think about that spies do, but we do a lot of paperwork. I got to tell you, every time I watch those movies and I see something blow up, or I see James Bond do something, I'm like, how many memos I would have to write if that actually happened. I can only think of the paperwork when I see that stuff. So wanted to get involved and put in my application. Then 10 years later, I thought, well, I did it. I served was involved, and maybe it's time to do something else. But I had a great run. Really enjoyed it and recommend it. I tell people, if you're interested in a career at CSIS, check out the website, go to the website, see if there's jobs interest you, and apply, because it is not a job where they're going to call you in a week and say, can you start on Monday? It is a long process. And I hear from people who are applying saying, 6 months, I don't know, and it's taking forever. I say, that's how long it takes. Part of the application is a massive background check where they need to go through and make sure that that you are reliable, and you're testing your loyalty and making sure that there are nothing in your background where you can be blackmailed and held against you. So, they do their due diligence on you, and that takes time, unfortunately. So, go through the steps, and if you get lucky in a year and a half, they'll say, we need you, come to Ottawa.
One of the big issues that's been in the news, obviously, is foreign interference in elections. You were on CBC.
Yes.
A little while ago chatting about that. Tell me, this obviously has been a concern. Number one, that it may have been occurring. Number two, that CSIS knew about it, and somehow the information didn't get through to the right people in the government. And then I guess number three, but should spies be leaking information to the press? So maybe talk about all three of those issues if you could.
Absolutely. It's been a huge story, obviously, and followed closely by the public, but also those like me, in the intelligence community, former intelligence officers. Look, leaks are bad. We cannot have individual intelligence officers, people with access to sensitive information, determining what they would like selectively the public to know, whether they're leaking that to the press or to whoever. I wrote a book. I get the irony of saying this as someone who wrote a book. I had to take a number of steps to make sure that the things that I was talking about did not violate the Security of Information Act, that I was not, on side with my legal obligations to protect the information that I was privy to. So, number one, leaks are bad, and we can't have people make those decisions, because at some point they'll make the wrong decision. Now, this has fortunately, raised light on an issue, a very serious issue. Foreign interference is one of the core parts of the CSIS mandate. And you better believe they've been out there, my former colleagues, investigating threats to Canada, the form of foreign interference, election meddling, threats to our democracy. That's a core part of what CSIS does. But CSIS advises and government decides, and that's the distinction. So we have intelligence officers like me who are out having coffee and conversations at Tim Hortons and collecting information, or my other career out planting, technical surveillance devices and getting covert recordings. And then back in Ottawa, there's some analysts who are putting all this human intelligence, technical intelligence, putting this all together, all this information, and advising the government on the threat, right? And then the government makes the decision about what to do with that information, what mitigation measures to put in place, laws they might need to pass, where policies need to be made, decisions. And clearly, there was a feeling amongst the leaker that maybe the response was not appropriate or robust enough, right? And that is what kind of played out in public. Was this information comes out, everyone is aghast, like, oh, I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe, this is the information's available, and what do we do about it, right? And that is, something that hasn't kind of played out in public. But I assure you that governments are receiving threat information like this all the time, right? This is what's going on. And then they have to decide, and that is the challenge about what are the appropriate steps that they can do, that they should do to counter these threats, right? And that's with the calls for a public inquiry. That is, I think, what we would, I would like to see is, this was the response appropriate? What steps were taken? Because we're in a unique situation here where this foreign interference, election meddling, is allegedly benefited a party that had access to the information that was responsible for dealing with it. So it's a bit of a challenge, right? We have to take their word for it that, well, we took it seriously and we did the right things with it. And I think the leaks, maybe are calling that into question to say, well, with this severe information, what did you do? And was it enough? And that's where, as I said, I would like kind of an airing publicly about what steps we're doing. One, to appreciate the threat, so people understand the threat, and also to restore some confidence in our institutions, that they're doing their job and they're collecting this information, that the government is getting good information, that people like myself, aren't wasting our times out there, you know, having the coffees and working late hours, and that we are using it, taking that intel, and operationalizing it, putting it to good use, making good decisions with it, because it's real. The threat. There are countries that are attempting to interfere in our democracy, that are trying to steal intellectual property, or trying to get any kind of advantage they can, and that's what countries do, and then it's on us to defend ourselves, right? Like, I don't hold it against other countries to advance their interests. I think we just need to be more robust in our defense of ours.
So is the individual that leaked this a whistleblower, or someone that we should be, taking to court for breaking secrecy?
Yeah, I consider them a leaker. I don't think anything illegal was uncovered, right? This wasn't in a matter of somebody that they handed information to didn't was doing something illegal. I'm not a lawyer, so let me say that right off the bat, that I'm sure there are legal definitions that someone much better than myself would be able to comment on. But I think they took raw intelligence, raw information selectively from various sources, and at various stages of production. I don't know if these were draft reports, final reports, and sent them out to the public. I think that's, in my mind, that is leaking. Now, I think whether it's in public, there's all sorts of tests, right? If it was in the public interest, if illegal activity was uncovered, I think the courts get to decide that. And many people will feel like this is great that we're having these conversations, right? That how good is this that now we're talking about these serious things, that a good came of it. But it's a real problem if you're letting leaks drive your public policy conversation, because, as I said, then you're going to have anyone who thinks that making these independent decisions that eventually you won't agree with. And
but I also think about the people that called themselves whistleblowers in the United States are now in a London embassy or a Russian embassy because the U.S. thought that they were threats to national security. And in Canada, it seems like we've congratulated this individual, whoever that person might be.
Well, and here's, and here's the other challenge we're having, right? Like, I don't know if it's linked or not, but in Parliament, not too long ago, after the foreign interference, we have the Prime Minister saying that India was involved or had some sort of hand in the assassination of a Canadian on Canadian soil. And many people say that the reason that he went public with this proclamation because there was going to be a Globe and Mail story that said this very thing. So, it's my concern that someone who was working the India desk saw what the spotlight the PRC desk was getting and said, well, hey, maybe we can start talking about these kind of things. Maybe that will get attention. And that's just we cannot operate that way, right? These anytime you start relieving intel, you give the opponent or the side insight into how you're collecting information against them, right? So if you start saying, hey, we have this intel from a conversation, well, typically a conversation between two people, and they can figure out, okay, which one of you is being intercepted, right? If they're saying this information was gleaned from surveillance, then we're saying, oh, well, maybe someone here is being surveilled, right? We don't want to tip our hand in the sources and methods, because that affects our ability to continue to collect information.
But yet you've got lots of people saying, India's saying, some of the opposition politicians are saying, tell us how you got this information. Prove to us that it's right.
And that's it. So once you say we have this, the logical next question is, how do you know? What do you mean? How can you say that? And that is the challenge with intel. And my position, once again, as someone who wrote a book, has always been that we should be more public. I think the public should know what the threats are. I think it's our best interest, so everyone can be a little more vigilant on the threats. And CSIS should be more transparent and public about that they're working, what they're working on, how they do their job, the help that they need, so that when they make these statements, people will they won't come out of the blue, and they'll have kind of trust built up. But ultimately, you can't kind of burn phone lines. You can't burn sources. When I'm out having a conversation with somebody, and it's important, so I'm saying, or any coffee shop, pardon me, don't say just one or another.
Well,
Look,
you're just
you
trying to
talk to
keep your
me.
expenses down. You're not going to a
That's
fancy
right.
coffee shop.
But I'm having this conversation. I'm saying to somebody, I said, look, I'm here from CSIS, and I want to have a conversation. And anything that you tell me will stay between us. And this information is very important, and I will protect your confidentiality. I will make sure that anything you tell me is protected, and we will have a relationship of trust where you can tell me sensitive information, and you will trust that I can protect it and keep you safe. And that is a very real conversation, that this confidentiality, this trust that you build, and we take it very, very, very seriously. That is number one, is protect your sources and your confidentiality. So where you lose that, obviously your people's willingness to share with you might be affected. Ability to recruit in the future might be affected. So we have to protect it, and certainly the intelligence officers, they do all they can to do that.
We're chatting tonight with Andrew Kirsch, who is a former CSIS intelligence officer, about his career, about a TEDx talk he did, about his book, and about some of the security challenges that we have in Canada today. We're going to take a break for some messages and be back. And I'm going to ask him about a post that he did about the 3 things that he would have done differently. I'm going to ask him to read something from his book, and we're going to come back to this topic of election interference, because I think it really is one of the critical issues in Canada today. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2 minutes with Andrew Kirsch, Canada Spy. Kirsch, Andrew Kirsch. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Andrew Kirsch, who runs the Kirsch Group. It's a risk intelligence company, a consulting company that is based on his experience as a spy, as an intelligence officer with CSIS, the Canadian Securities Intelligence Service. And he's written a book, and he's done a TEDx talk that I've heard great things about. And so I wanted to find out a little bit more about his life, how he got into it, and what the experience was like. And I found, Andrew, really interesting, a post you made about if you could change 3 things about your experience at CSIS and about the job, and that you would change it. What would you do? And you came up with 3 really interesting ones. I'm not sure if you remember them, but I wonder if you could talk about them. I can remind you what you said if you'd like.
Yes, please. I think I know 2 out of 3, but if you could remind me.
Number 1 was I would find a better balance about sharing with family and close friends about where I worked and what I did there.
Yes, that is the number. I found the number 1 challenge is you go away, and it's that we're working domestically. So I come home every night to family and friends. I live in close to people I went to school with, and I just never quite felt comfortable with having these 2 lives and being able to balance out who I told, what I told them. You come to kind of fear going out, because I go out with a bunch of friends and I say, oh, what did I tell that person? And what story did I come up with that person? Or what did I do? And I don't want to lie to this person. I hate, there's a big misconception. I talked about this in the TEDx talk, that you must like lying or enjoy it. Well, I hated it, especially the people closest to me. But you realize the only thing harder than lying to someone you care about is telling them the truth and then asking them to lie for you. They didn't sign up for this life, and so people would ask my brother, what does Andrew do? And well, I know he works. I don't know. He works for the government, and I don't really know. And he feels bad, and he didn't want to lie to that person, and he doesn't know what to say, but he wants to protect me. So I think just having a better handle on maybe being more open and honest and forthright and saying, yeah, I work for CSIS and I can't talk much about it. It's probably a better way to go than doing this strange tap dance where I would give weird partial answers and rambling non sequiturs.
It's probably a different kind of experience, but my uncle was U.S. Naval Intelligence during the Korean War, and he was stationed in Japan. And he would tell us stories about how, he would tell someone, well, I'm going to work, and then he would disappear for 6 weeks because he wouldn't be able to tell them where he was going and what he was doing, and he would come back and he wouldn't be able to tell them anything about where he went and what he did, and that his whole life was something that he had to keep secret from absolutely everyone, including the person he was living with.
it's, there's the very broad where do you work questions, and I try to parry those off. But then there was, when I was doing special operations, I was working late at night. I was going out 11 p.m. to 4 a.m. and I was married, and I would tell my wife, I can't tell you where I'm going, I can't tell you who I'm meeting or what I'm doing. I think I'll be home around 3 or 3:30, but I don't know for sure. Good night, I love you, and see you in the morning. And that's a tough way to leave somebody when you're heading out. I think the condo building concierge thought I was a drug dealer for sure, going out late at night in dark vans at all hours. But there was what I could tell and what I couldn't, and trying to find that balance to include people in my life, but also protect the information and where I was going was something I didn't figure out until I got further into my career, and you start to settle into it, and you realize what your kind of story is, who you're telling. And I would have told my younger self starting out, don't stress out that much about it. Just be a little more open about it. It'll save you. It'll save you unnecessary stress. There's plenty of stress in the job. Take that one off the table.
Number 2 was, I would have paid closer attention to what the texts were. What does that mean?
Yeah. So the world that, and I'm sure you talked about this, the technology, the explosion of technology in our lives, our interconnectedness, the apps we're using, the computer programs and whatnot, these are creating vulnerabilities in our life that certainly we used to exploit. And we were the good guys, right? That we were taking advantage of people who were connected and using this type of technology, and being able to go online and do a scrape of somebody's profile and determine, where they're going, what they're doing, who they're connected to, what information you can glean of that. And the techs were able to leverage technology. So the technologists, the IT guys, were able to use tools, interpret that information, kind of collate that data in a way that is extremely useful. Now that in my private security career, I'm asked to do that, and I have technologists on our team, but that's only getting, let's say, more complicated and more important to be able to gather information on people, to protect yourself, to see what is available about you online, so that you can start to mitigate some of the risk that's available. And I wish I'd seen 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when this was just starting out. Oh yeah, this is not slowing down. Let's see how the techs do this. Let's see what tools they're using.
Give us a sense of, I think we've all known about sort of recording devices. Give us a sense of what some of that tech is.
Well, so I mean, it can be very basic, right? When I was going out to knock on doors, and I was looking for somebody with access to threat-related information and who would be willing to talk to me about it, and not tell people that I was there to talk to them. Okay, so we try to build a profile of individuals. We go online now. 15 years ago, I do a Google search, and if somebody showed up in the news, well, that's great, right? I know maybe they were simply motivated to help out, or they had family that was a police officer or something like that, right? But we're trying to build a profile of people to figure out what is their access to information. What's the likelihood they will talk to us, or are they close to the people that we are investigating? And you're trying to, build this profile. Well, now if you go online, you can see on Facebook, they're liking whose photos that they are liking and connected to. On LinkedIn, you can see everyone they're connected to at work and their business network and what they did and where they worked. And every thought they ever had in their life is on Twitter. So you could build these profiles, pretty easily. The difference is
we're doing the work for you now. You don't even have to do it anymore.
You better believe it. It is we used to be looking for information. Now the new challenge is sorting through it and trying to figure out the relevance of it. Right? We have all this information on people, and here's a quick distinction, right? Folks think, oh, if CSIS is coming to talk to me, then I must be in trouble. Well, further from the case. Often we're out talking to people who we think will help us. When I say I'm Andrew and I need your help, it's because I think that by your position in the community, a job or your neighborhood, that you might have information and be willing to tell me about it. So part of the thing of looking, people say, oh, will this person help me? Or, would they, are they super close to the person that I'm going to ask them about? Right. And trying to figure out that relationship to the information that they have. So when I say text, it's like, well, how are we gathering these profiles on people? How are we analyzing that to make an understanding of it? And then where I help clients and organizations, it's like, okay, well, how are people doing this to you, right? How are people gathering information on your business and your organization that they're going to use to exploit it, that they're going to use to phish one of your employees, that they're going to use a leaked password that you were, from your LinkedIn page to get access to your organization. Where are you vulnerable to people who are using this information? So it's not as even a nanny, hacking into a nanny cam in a home. It is creating these
Can you do that?
profiles.
Can you hack into a nanny cam?
Well, people can hack into any internet connected device. Is a gateway, right? And the key is to make sure that you have proper controls around your modem and your Wi-Fi, and you've changed your settings and all these things that no one can exploit. That connectivity, right? Once it goes to the internet, anyone can log in the internet and get access to it, unless you.
I keep on wondering what Google and Alexa actually listen to and know.
And look, I use these things, right? So I don't want to freak people out and say, well, I got to go off the grid and be in my basement and write every note on a pen and pencil. We are connected. We do online banking because of the convenience. Just know that when you use those things, that you create kind of vulnerabilities, and the key is to make sure you have appropriate security in place to protect it. So for your banking, unique password that if you get leaked somewhere else, that it's not going to, that person who has that password isn't also going to have the password to your banking. Yahoo got hacked many years ago, and somebody could go and see my fancy football rosters, but they're with that password, they're not going to get in to my more sensitive information. And that's where the security comes in. That's what we do. That's what I do now.
Number 3 was I would have developed and cultivated my professional network more. You talked about RCMP, local police, OPP, and even the FBI, CIA, etc.
Yes. So, one of the challenges of being a spy is, especially when you're working, you're not working under your real name, you might have a working name, is that anyone who ever met you is supposed to not admit they ever met you. That's part of the deal. All the confidential informants and human sources, they are.
I mean, you weren't really Adam Kirsch. You were Bond,
no,
James Bond.
I was other thing at other. Andrew. People called me Andrew, but I had many other names, and so those folks were probably maybe very surprised to see my face on a book and a name they didn't recognize as the author of it. But to any young person, this is really my advice to any young person starting out. You're not only as good as your network, but certainly I met police. We worked a little bit with the CIA and the Mossad and other organizations. And, it's okay to build a professional network in whatever organization you're in, because you move into private security, and your professional network is the people that you lean on, the people you can ask favors of and ask for help, and build those relationships. And I think I was so concerned about being a secret squirrel, as we're called, and a super sneaky spy, that I didn't do that well. I recommend that to anybody in any career. It's build your professional network, build the people that you can ask for help, that will reach out to you, that you can partner up with on things. And I did that. I became very, very, very secret in my personal life, and a little bit too much in my professional life too. And so I would tell myself, hey, I had the cops called on me a couple times when I was working, because no one believed I worked for CSIS. And I actually got the name of that cop. That was just a fun story, and we joke about it this day. It didn't happen. CIA, FBI, Mossad, not the British. Came across a lot of security folks that, as I said, should have made a note and stayed in touch.
Show us your book and tell us the title and where.
Yeah. So it's I Was Never Here, my true Canadian spy story of coffees, code names, and covert operations in the age of terrorism. And it's fun. It looks very serious. I joke to people, like, I survived. If you see me there all blindfolded, I didn't make it out okay. And you can get it wherever you buy your books, Indigo, Amazon, local bookstores. It was a national bestseller when it came out for a couple of weeks, and very proud of it. You will not get any secrets that I was allowed to tell, but if you ever thought about joining CSIS, a career in intelligence, what that would look like, what it was like, that's what it's for. It's not a policy book, it's not a legal book. It's just, this is what happened when someone who had no idea what they were getting themselves into decided they wanted to be a spy, and nothing ever goes right. It's never what you think. There's more paperwork than you thought, and it's a rewarding, challenging, strange, fun career that I'm proud of. I'm proud of the organization I work for. I think more people should know about it, and that's why I wrote the book.
We're having a fascinating conversation tonight with Andrew Kirsch, Canadian spy. We're going to take a break and come back with some concluding comments in just 2 minutes. Stay with us, everybody. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour on Saga 960. My guest tonight is Andrew Kirsch, who is a spy, at least was one, and has written a fascinating book and done some TEDx talks, and is now running his own Kirsch organization that provides risk consulting, spy kind of services, intelligence services to people. Andrew, I want to ask you a couple of final questions, if I could, and get some quick answers from you. I had someone describe the Russian invasion of Ukraine as one where we had all the intelligence we ever needed, but the political people didn't really believe it was going to happen, and so therefore the political judgment was wrong. And then the Hamas invasion of Israel 2 weeks ago as the biggest intelligence failure in history. Any reaction to that?
I've gotten this question a lot about how could this happen, right? That the Israel, a very robust intelligence service, living beside a neighbor who they know is out to get them. There's a long history of conflict in the area, in the region. That how can you be caught surprised? And I say that is, it really is something that I'm sure they're going to have to look at. Is say, how did we miss this? Right? Is it a question of one side being so overt and good about keeping their intentions and activities quiet so that it was not picked up by by the intelligence service? Or do you get so much noise, we call it so much noise, that you can't figure out what's really happening, that they just flooded the zone with intel and threats and conversations and obscuring what was real and what wasn't, where they couldn't pinpoint what exactly was happening because there was just a constant bombardment. Both are challenges. Either you're missing something, and that's a specific challenge, which is, we don't have the human sources, the technical sources. We're not collecting the right intelligence from the right sources. Or, as I said, if you are getting too much, you're not corroborating it well. You're not being able to decipher what's good intel and what's not. So when I was at CSIS, we had at that time, when I joined, we were very much worried about domestic bombs going off, the Toronto 18, the Via Rail plot, that these things were going to happen in Canada. And then we had this phenomenon of foreign fighters, people who wanted to go and join ISIS. Right? And you had a lot of people who were saying, I go ISIS, and I support, and I'm going to go, and I just watch me, and I'm going to if I'll get over there and help out and join the cause. And you wouldn't know the real challenge was, who's going to do something, right? Who's talking about it? Who is with their friends bragging and trying to be tough, and then who's actually going to go out and do it? And
the quiet ones, obviously.
Yeah, right. And if you have somebody who's sitting in their basement writing on a pen and pencil, making their plan, not talking to anybody about it, good luck, right? Like, good luck trying to find that person. But where you see a large, coordinated, hundreds, if not thousands of people who clearly have to be communicating about what the time they were going to go and what they were going to do, and you should be able to. You can't miss those. Right, you should have enough.
Oh, they obviously missed it in Israel a couple of weeks ago,
and that is it. So that is it happening. is this person going to do something? What are they going to do? And every day, you're triaging and trying to make those distinctions, and then use your resources appropriately. Right? There's a finite number of Canadian spies out there chasing a number of people who say they're going to do something, and you got to figure out that one's a real one, that one's a not. And good luck to you getting it right every single day. And for a big coordination like this, they're going to have to go and have a serious look about, did they miss it or did they not see it? Right. And that, I think those are different.
Let me ask you a last question, if I could. I interviewed one of your former peers, I guess, who said the challenge in Canada is we actually collected the intelligence, but people didn't respect it or read it. And in the United States, the FBI, the CIA are respected parts of sort of government. And in Canada, we just don't have a respect for our intelligence agencies. And so therefore, no one read these documents about China or other things like that. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think that was the defense of the government. We didn't see it. We didn't read it. No one told us to open our emails. And I find that incredibly frustrating. Now I hold both parties accountable, right? One, obviously, the key decision makers, if you are not receiving the information that you are mandated, you are overseeing our intelligence service, you're overseeing our national security, you better make sure you can read your emails. And if you can't, if someone is not sending that information to you, it is incumbent upon you to make sure you're getting the briefs, right? That you are operating with a full amount of information. And from the intelligence service too, I think that they have an obligation to raise some awareness to the public, when we talk about recruiting, right? We're always recruiting our sources. Well, you can recruit your politicians too, right? You can recruit the people above you to say, hey, you got to take this seriously. Hey, this is a real thing. That's a failure of recruitment. If your political masters are not taking you seriously or not listening to the threats that you're putting in front of them. So they have a role to play as well. And I don't think it's a surprise to say that in Canada, we can be complacent, that we have a very large, neighbor that we feel will always protect us and defend us, that we don't face very real threats, that, who's really out to get us. But I like to say is that whatever safety and security that we enjoy here in Canada, it is not an accident. It's not guaranteed to continue. It's because every day, thousands of people in intelligence, law enforcement, military, corporate security are getting up to do what they can to keep it that way. It's not an evidence we don't need it. It's an evidence that to some extent it works. So we have to stay vigilant, and we can't be driven by things going public. We have to stay on top of it, because the way it works is something goes wrong, something goes boom, and then everybody cares. And then we, further away from it, we go, well, is that really a problem? Well, we probably, no. We need to be constantly aware that we face very real threats and challenges. We are not a large country. We have a good intelligence service that punches above its weight. But people are out to get us, and that we have to stick up for ourselves, and that we need to take those threats seriously. And it starts with reading the emails. It really starts with reading the emails and getting the information and making sure it gets in the right hands. And then it's going to lead to some tough political conversations and response. And so, we're not doing number one great, apparently. And we need to do number one great before we get to number two, which will be, what are we prepared to do? What are we prepared to do about it?
Andrew Kirsch, thank you very much for joining us and telling us a little bit about your career and about CSIS and about some of the things that we need to be aware of in regards to election interference and some issues that are happening in regards to our freedom and our security in Canada. Thank you so much. I gotta make one comment on this, and I've never had a job comparable to yours, but I've often been, a senior corporate individual, and I've had lots of bosses that say, sending me the email is fine, but if it's really important, call me or come into my office and tell me, force me to consume the information such that it becomes knowledge, because just sending it to me doesn't mean that I'm going to focus on it. And I think, regrettably, that's the truth. Andrew Kirsch, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That's our show for tonight. Thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it. Good night, everybody.